Today I'd like to go over the lessons learned from the Dallas and Fort Worth, North Texas power outage from about a month ago. There was a small, relatively small storm about the size of Dallas County that came through, and it came through quickly, and in the aftermath of that small storm, the majority of that whole area was out of power for at least one day. Some areas, luckily, were only at power for a couple hours, but most were out for definitely a day. A huge chunk were out for 2 days, and then some people did not get power for 4 days. And it wasn't a small number. There were still huge swaths of people that did not get their power until Thursday of that week when the storm hit on Sunday. And I want to just go through some quick points that are important for when this kind of stuff comes up. And that is to stay weather aware for what's going on for storms. To know, a part of being weather aware is to know what season you're in. If you're in winter or you're in the dead of summer, yeah, the weather could be bad and there might be some thunderstorms that come up. But if you're in the south in the spring, you need to know some of those storms can pop up out of nowhere. Be aware when you're in those kind of seasons, plan for it being a storm. You need to have a way to keep your food cold, generator or Goal Zero or something for at least, based on this situation, for at least 4 days. And you need to be able to charge your phone to know what's going on. What are you going to do about a climate control? Because if you have a really young child or you're elderly and you need that air conditioning or heating depending on what the season is, you need to have a plan in place to go to a hotel. Where is that hotel going to be? Go ahead and have some specific hotels marked down so you know if this storm comes through and it's just this area, we can just go over here. And always have money budgeted for a week in a hotel. That's just good budgeting. That way, if the storm does come through and it uproots a massive oak tree and rips out the side of your house, you can at least have somewhere to sleep and get some breakfast and take some showers and use the restroom that you don't have to worry about, and get on the internet and just somewhere that's safe. And that way then you can go back to your home during the day and deal with that. The other thing that came through that I noticed after the storm had happened was people, I guess not surprisingly, forgot how to drive with blinking red lights, or in about half the cases for the majority of the city were no blinking red lights. There were no lights, and there were just wrecks everywhere from people that just completely forgot how to operate a vehicle at all. Some people I watched would just blow through an intersection for whatever reason, with cars stopped everywhere. Some cars would just stop and sit there. And then people would swerve around and try and go around because the person sitting in their car just had no clue what to do. And then you have other issues where the repercussions of that can ripple for miles. And you have cars that are going back miles and miles and miles that are trying to, those few cars that are having to go slower, all these cars might not know what's going on, so then they have wrecks back here, which just domino effects to more wrecks, which slows everyone else down. And you need to have multiple ways to get home, because sometimes this stuff can happen so fast, and this is a really good example of what could happen in a major disaster, which I would count this as for that few days. You need to be prepared that Google and Waze and Apple Maps is not going to work. And as good as Waze is, I love Waze, when stuff is happening that fast and you all of a sudden you go from a city that's operating with millions of people to traffic jam at literally every single red light in the whole county, plus the counties around there, within 10 minutes on a weekend, it's just madness. and you need to know how to get around. And you also, that's another reason to have at least half a tank full of fuel, because a drive that normally would have taken us probably 15 minutes, I believe it turned into an hour and a half. And we were the fortunate ones, because I talked to plenty of people that were stuck in traffic, and even watched on the news people said they were stuck in traffic for hours just trying to get across town. Not even that far of a distance, but it was madness everywhere. Even the freeways, because people were trying to exit on every exit, and then you couldn't realize the lights were out. So then every exit is backed up. And you just have to keep in the back of your head different ways to get around town that are small streets. And yeah, it's gonna take a long time, but it has stop signs, and people at least remember how to use stop signs, because just forget about traffic lights. The other thing is, what are you gonna do about work and school? Because a lot of places, they had to close for school. What are you gonna do with your kids? Are you gonna take a sick day? Remember to have sick days built up in case something like that happens. Have at least a week in case you do have to keep your child at home. Are you able to take your child to work? And if so, kind of plan that out now. And then if this kind of situation comes up where it's not a holiday and it's not a vacation, and it's just a random day in the week, and then the school can't open because there's no electricity, what are you going to do about that? And then the other thing is, you need to be able to take care of yourself, because there were plenty of departments that we were listening to on the scanner that were having major issues and just trying to get themselves back in order. And it took, some of them, it took up to 12 hours, some until the next day, just to get to like a neutral position where things were not falling apart and things weren't getting a lot better, but they were able to get their communications up. They were able to figure out what was going on, get roads opened, because massive trees were just down. Road crews were working everywhere because they couldn't get around anywhere. That's why it's really good to have, if you are the age that you can have it, physically be able to operate it. A chainsaw. We have a Ryobi battery one. We also have a steel, really good one. But we have in Dallas, we have a battery powered 16-inch Ryobi, and it's not going to cut down massive trees, but you can cut off enough chunks to be manageable, at least to pull with a car or something, and be able to move around. So right now, all that was just about mobility, because you had trees down, lights not working, people scared, people not knowing what's going on. And you need to be able to, at least in the short term, be able to handle major medical stuff, because everyone was just so backed up with wrecks and major issues. That's a perfect example in 2019 on a non-expecting weekend that things went crazy. And if you had cut yourself with a chainsaw, if you had tripped and fallen, if you had burned yourself, those kind of issues that can be really bad, you need to be able to stabilize yourself or stabilize the person you're with and move forward. And that's a really important thing, because when you're in that big of a disaster, as I would call it, for Sunday until early Monday morning, when you're in that kind of a disaster and you run out of ambulances and your mutual aid runs out of ambulances and the fire department is backed up trying to get to calls, or even trying to physically get to calls because everything is down around them, those are situations where you have to just be very prepared. Not even on the safety side, just on the medical side. The safety thing is a whole other thing. The power's out, and like every other situation, criminals are going to take advantage, so just be prepared for that too. The other thing is food. If your power goes out at your house and you are on an electric stove electric water heater, all those kinds of things, how are you gonna make dinner? Do you have the ability to do that? Because all the restaurants that were around us, minus probably 2 or 3, and keep in mind we are very close to the center, close to downtown. All of those restaurants were out of power, minus a few, and the few that had power had lines for forever trying to get to places. And just trying to get to the restaurant, once you get home and you realize you need to get something to eat, and needing to get to a restaurant is a marathon in itself. And that comes in a really good situation of, those kind of times that cars maybe aren't the best thing to do, and maybe you just want to bike to the store or bike to a restaurant that is open. And you have to keep in mind, again, people are acting crazy, so you have to have, if your situational awareness is usually pretty high, you have to like ratchet it up to 10, because people are not paying attention to anything, and they're frustrated and they're scared. You have to just really watch out for that kind of stuff. And all that to say, transportation is a big one. How are you going to eat? Keeping your stuff cold. Where are you going to sleep? Can you sleep at home with some fans and a small generator? Or are you in a medical situation or an age situation where you need to be in an air-conditioned or heated environment? And those are all things to consider. And do you have enough ability to take off work for those kind of emergencies if you do have if you're included in that disaster? And there were no major gas station issues this go around, but that is something to consider, is that if gas stations are affected and they don't have generators to run stuff, or they run out of fuel for their generators, then it goes back to making sure you have some fuel in reserve so you can get around. Because again, small storm, if this had been even bigger, and you're looking at a longer time frame, because they were bringing crews in from all over the country to help with this, and it still took 4 days to get back up and going. You need to make sure that you can have all your bases covered. Shelter, make sure you can either cover your shelter or get to somewhere that is shelter. Water, the water didn't go off, but that easily could have happened. Make sure you have ability, that you have water stored up, at least at this point, at least 4 days now. Because with all these kind of situations that come up, I like to use that as my baseline, because about a year ago, my baseline for power outage was about an hour. The longest that we'd ever gone while we had been in Dallas was an hour of no power. And that was easily manageable. Some, APC backup batteries, and plugging them into the right stuff so they don't drain a lot of power, but your stuff still functions for an hour. Then we had an issue come through, and we had a 4-hour power outage, and that was my new baseline. So now I'm hoping everyone in Dallas, North Texas, their baseline should be 4 days. And that 4-day baseline should be all of your food, water, fuel, medication, and shelter. And even in 2019, in a very modern and up-to-date city that's growing all the time, you need to be able to handle, at this point, 4 days of all those items. And I hope this is helpful. It is very important, because when you're getting into summertime with these temperatures, or you're getting into winter, that's the same thing when it gets really, really cold. You need to make sure you can drink, eat, sleep, and be safe, and power your stuff to know what's going on. Thank you for watching.